Welcome back, everybody. In today's video, we're going to be going over a February 2026 Canmore and surrounding area real estate market recap. We'll talk about what happened in the month of February, break down some specific property types as per usual, and then go into some year-to-date stuff. So, do you want to start talking about the different market sectors?
Sure. Let's start with Canmore. 35 sales in the month of February. Just over a million 50 was the average sale price. Average square foot price was 847 and 63 days on the market.
For Banff, we saw two sales for an average sale price of just under 2.2 million. The average square foot price came in at $717 a foot for those two properties, and it took an average of 20 days to move.
Deadman's Flats, 38 sales, $870,000 average. So those won't be residential homes. Average square foot price, $1,013 a square foot and 23 days on the market.
Lac des Arcs, there was one sale for an average sale price for a sale price of 1.64 million. It sold with $464 a foot, and it took 89 days to sell. We didn't see anything in Harvey Heights or Exshaw. So we can move into talking about the specific property types for the Canmore real estate market. So for single family homes, we currently have 28 active single family homes as of the 1st of March. We saw four sales in February for an average sale price of just over 1.8 million. Average square foot price for those four sales was $740 a foot, and it took an average of 108 days to sell.
In the townhomes, we had 34 sales. There's 34 active properties. Sales were 1,081,081 and change. Average square foot price was $794 a square foot and 61 days on the market.
Apartments, we have 37 active apartments on the market moving into March. 16 sales were recorded in February for an average sale price of $653,000. Average square foot price for those apartments, $719 a foot, and it took 62 days on average to sell.
Half duplexes, 12 active on the market. One sale, 2.3 million was the average sale price, $839 per square foot, and 139 days on the market.
Now we'll talk about some short-term rentals. Hotel condo, we currently have 16 active properties, which is not a lot. We saw two sales in February. Average sale price for those two were $782,000. Average square foot price was coming in at just shy of $1,400 a foot, and average days on the market were 18, still flying off the shelf.
And tourist homes, 5 active properties on the market. There were 4 sales, 1.651, again, $1,300 a square foot. That's interesting to me, Parker, with the hotel condos being a little bit more than the tourist homes. We don't typically see that, but I know those tourist homes, I think one of those was Spring Creek. Anyways, average days on the market was 28 days.
Yeah. So that's the specific property types. I don't think we need to talk too much about it. Kind of basic statistics. The only thing that I really noticed was the average sale price was quite a bit lower than last month's, but in reflection of that, our average square foot price is a little bit higher. So again, as usual, it usually just varies on what's sold in the month.
Yeah.
But let's talk about some year-to-date statistics and some inventory levels. So sold listings year-to-date in 2025, we had 58. And in 2026, we also have 58. The 5-year average is 37. So pretty strong for sold listings and matching directly what we saw last year. So no change.
End of month inventory, 122 in 2025, and in 2026 we have 135. 5-year average is 101, so we're above that. That's a good thing.
Mhm.
And the market does seem to be really picking up, so we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
That's an 11% increase on the active inventory.
Yeah, from 2025.
Yes,
A-
yeah, on the year to date.
Average sale price year to date in 2025, we were just shy of 1.5 million, 1.495 to be exact. And in 2026 year to date, we're at 1.2 and change. The 5-year average is $1 million. So we are down 24% from 2025 year to date. Now, keep in mind, last January there was a property up in Silvertip that sold for 8.7 million. So I encourage people to not get discouraged by that. Um, our average square foot price is really strong, and it's definitely higher than it was last year. And we're obviously above the 5 year average as we should be. So I think,
And we're not seeing less sales, right?
right.
So if the average sale price drops, but the square foot price goes up, but the actual sales drop, you
Yeah.
may start to think about it differently in the market. But we're not seeing that at all. In fact, the buzz around Canmore is quite high.
Hmm.
Like we have said in the last couple of videos, I think Parker, you reiterated it the most, was you feel like we were at the bottom. And I wasn't sure, but I think that you were probably right. Now, when we talk about bottom and top, we're not talking about big swings here. We did see swings through COVID, but we're just talking about we leveled off, and I think we're starting to hit a point in the market where we're going to see some growth again.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's my opinion, anyway.
I think sustainable growth too. I think it's not going to, you know, go to the full end of the spectrum like we did see at one point. I think it's just going to be sustainable now. But we were wondering when that floor was going to be the floor, and now
Yeah,
now we kind of know where that was.
yeah.
And we could talk about a little bit of some of the reasonings as to why we think that. um, I do want to touch on the foreign buyer ban. It's been a
Hmm.
conversation that you and I've been having frequently, and the ban's in place until 2027. Now, the government of Canada has noted that they plan and intend to review that before the expiry date. So, whether that means they're going to extend it or do something different, remove it, is yet to be determined, of course. But
Hmm.
my opinion is based on the conversations that we've had and the statistics and data that I've looked at. And by no means am I an expert in these areas, but Vancouver, Toronto, these types of places, like a lot of the luxury, a lot of the downtown condo market are struggling right now with a lot of vacancy. And part of that is because we don't have the ability for foreign investors to come in and scoop those up, which is a big
Hmm.
deal. I mean, there's lots of foreign investors who are operating businesses out of major cities in Canada,
Yeah.
yet they're limited to what they could do in the housing market. So I think that the government is going to have to reintroduce that. It's interesting. I've seen some statistics where it's the foreign buyer limit is only really affecting about 1 to 2% of the housing market. So I don't think that foreign buyers are coming in and scooping up anything that's really affecting things becoming more affordable. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, we've seen that in the last year that we haven't had the foreign buyers buying for what has it been 2 years now? More?
Yeah. Yeah. Two. I think it was a 2-year ban, and then they extended it a year, right?
Yeah, and there's still conversation about things being not affordable in every country or in every province. So that's one thing. The other thing as well is I think that builders are finding that they're pumping out a lot of product and the demand just isn't there. So we're trying to build and develop on all this land that we have, and I'm talking more locally here, like Calgary, and
Yeah.
that market has cooled off so hard
Yeah.
that there just isn't the demand there to meet these new builds. So I don't think it really affects affordable housing as much as I think people had initially thought. I think that there's other ways that we can, as a country, this is just my opinion, of course, um, generate some revenue off of foreign ownership, whether that's a tax that foreign buyers have to pay to own property here. I mean, if I bought a property in, let's just say, a different country, Switzerland, for example, if that's where I really wanted to own another property and I was allowed to do so, but let's just say my tax bracket was a little bit higher. If I really wanted that property, I'm still going to invest in the market. So I
Hmm.
think that's just a one way that they could maybe revisit that, as opposed to just eliminating it, because I do think it helps the economy by having foreign ownership involved.
Yeah. And I mean, affordable housing is definitely an issue, and we've talked about it. I just don't think it's a one trick pony fix.
Hmm.
Developers have to be on board. Cost of products have to go down. And those things don't tend to happen without a lot of different economical forces changing, right?
Hmm.
Um, I think it was a band-aid. I'm I never thought it was going to work. Um, and you're seeing that effect coming in these different areas, right? I mean, I think about Canmore specifically, right? Foreign buyer ban. You're not talking about affordable. Sometimes, yes, okay, on the residential, but on the investment properties in town, what are we trying to make those more affordable to live in? It's not doesn't help affordable living because our zoning in this town is created differently, right?
Hmm.
We don't have our short-term rental properties within our residential zoning in Canmore.
Hmm.
They are strictly commercial zoning properties. So again, that the federal government put that in place in Canmore, and it didn't really change much, right?
Yeah.
Because it only affected the foreign buyers from buying here. It didn't help the affordable living there. It's definitely an issue, and it's a bigger conversation than having at this on this little podcast. But uh, it needs to be addressed for sure,
Yeah.
and I think that it's a big animal though for sure.
Well, and I think that there's two types of avatars when it comes to the foreign buyers from what I've seen. In Canmore, you're talking more so like the luxury side of things. You're talking about the investment side of things. So
Hmm.
no foreign buyer bans or no foreign buyers coming in and scooping up a, you know, entry level project uh, because it makes sense. Like in my opinion, those aren't the people who are inquiring who want
Right.
to buy real estate here, right? And then the other end of the spectrum is from what I've had an experience with talking to builders and developers and people who are investing and all of that is it. Let's just take Edmonton for an example. Like foreign buyers were really big in buying these big projects downtown, like big condo complexes,
Yeah.
investing a ton of capital into these
Yeah.
properties to redo them and then to rent them out. So
Yes.
they're bettering the rental market. They're creating more solutions for a lot
Yeah.
of people. They're not coming in there to buy it for it to necessarily just sit empty. That's more of the luxury side of things. And to be honest, who really cares about that, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you're going to own a luxury property in Canada, like, I don't think there's any Canadian that's going to be like, oh man, there's an $8 million house and it just sits empty. Like, so what? Like, they're
No, the
paying
majority of the
taxes and
people.
they're not even here. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
The
know, like,
majority of the people aren't gonna
yeah. So I
squander
think
about
that's
that.
what really takes a hit. It's just the foreign capital that's out there that like
Yeah.
Canada makes a lot of sense to be able to get into the market. And these people are just putting it elsewhere but they want to put it here because prices make sense. Alberta's got great tax regulations, all of that. It makes a ton of sense for a ton of capital to come into our province. And I know the rest of the country is different, but I don't know. I just think it's a missed opportunity personally. And that's just my perspective. But let's
I,
transition out of
I
that.
agree. I agree, Parker. Just one other point. What they did, I think did the opposite of what they thought it was going to do when it came to affordable housing.
Yeah.
Bottom line, I think that's the biggest thing. So
And I don't think that Alberta was really on the front of their reasoning for bringing that in. Like, I don't think that
no, I
they're
think
like,
it
"Oh,
was
Alberta's a
Toronto,
problem. We got to
Vancouver.
exactly," and it's
Yeah,
just done the opposite. Personally,
yeah, yeah. I agreed.
um, okay, let's talk about kind of what the market is doing and how it affects buyers. I'll let you kind of maybe take the lead on this.
Well, I think, like we've talked before, I think buyers have the ability to be a little bit more educated and not be so quick. Now, having said that, you and I, we talked about this in our last video, and then the first couple of deals you and I got into was fly off the shelf. So here's what's important: pre-approvals, they matter. And there are two types. We've talked about this. One, going into your financial institution or a mortgage specialist and getting approved on yeah, it looks good. And then there's the other one where they basically dive into everything and they go, yes, basically all that needs the approval is the property you're buying. that's the type of approval you want to have. Now, you definitely want to, in the Canmore market, get somebody that understands the market, right? From a standpoint of what do you need down, what changes as it grows, the escalation, because we're in Canmore, there aren't a lot of properties that fall into the 5% down payment. And that escalates your down payment as you grow in money, the more you need to borrow. So understanding that, having a financial specialist that understands those particular markets, residential, hotel condo, which is the short term, 30 days or less, and then the tourist zone, understanding those because they're very different, um, especially even inside the two investment properties. You know, you jump from 23 to 35, and then as you grow in borrowing, it's going to affect that as far as the payment or the down payment goes, it's going to affect that. So uh, pre-approvals matter. Understand, have somebody that understands the market as far as a financial institution or specialist. Zoning matters. What type of property you're going to look for. There is the ability for foreign buyers to buy in the Bow Valley still. It's outside of Canmore, Harvey Heights, Dead Man's Flats. So they can still buy if they're looking at that. And then how you structure your offer as a buyer, knowing what having someone, a professional in real estate that understands negotiations, understands how the the structure in Canmore works, understanding probably what type of conditions you might want, and positioning yourself well and pre-doing a bunch of those things so that you're prepared when you go to write an offer. It can make it seamless and it can help in the negotiation. So that's from a buyer perspective. I think that's what's important.
Yeah, I think that is all valuable intel for sure. I think from my perspective, just to kind of add on to it, I don't think I have a different perspective at all. I think what I'm seeing is that buyers, they have time to get educated. They have time to have conditions. They have time to,
Yes.
be thorough with a 10-day financing. They don't need to necessarily speed that up or get rid of it completely, which is a little bit different than what we've seen.
Mhm.
And I think that sellers in general, and I'll tie this into the next topic and what the market means for sellers a little bit, but sellers in general, I'm seeing that our average days on the market is around 60 days. And I think that's because sellers are naturally just overpricing the market a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's kind of become the norm where we see in most other markets where sellers will price a little bit. They're willing to negotiate. Before we didn't really see the negotiation side of things. Now we're seeing
No.
the negotiation side of things, which brings in the value and the asset of having a realtor who understands the market. But I do think that once a buyer is taking the time that they need to get pre-approved, understand the market, know exactly what they want and what they're looking for, they're acting very quickly after that. The balance in the market is just allowing them time to, because our inventory is still limited. Like, I know it's increased from years past, but it's still limited. Like, I mean, you go back to the statistics, we have 28 single families, we have 34 townhomes and 37 apartments in the residential sector. So it's not like we have an abundance of options
No.
to look at. If you
Agreed.
really like a specific community, I mean, you're looking at 1 to maybe 4 properties
Yeah.
max,
Yeah.
right? So it's not like there's a lot of inventory, but because these properties are priced a little bit higher, it's giving that buyer time to get educated on where they want to be, their financing, so on and so forth. And then they're going and seeing these, 2 or 3 properties on a showing list,
Yeah.
and then they're making an offer on one pretty quickly. So
Yes.
I still think action is coming quick. It's just allowing buyers to start the process and take their time with that, as opposed to like starting it long before their property search, or just, having the flexibility of being able to not have conditions.
Well, and
Um,
to your point on that, the reason it wasn't like that is because before, if something was sold at $2 million, the next one was 2.1. So there was that urgency. It wasn't that you couldn't find what you were looking for. Buyers were able to, you could wait 2 or 3 months, but the prices were jumping so much.
mhm,
So you felt like, holy cow, I really need to get after this because prices are growing, and not on a monthly basis, on a daily basis. They were just, next person up added a little bit more to their price. So buyers had to be ready to go from that standpoint. If they
yeah,
saw something they liked, they had to make an offer. Now things don't necessarily get added on to the market. I think is going to change that way though. Tuesday, we went to the realtor rounds, and we have very low inventory on the investor stuff, and we'll talk about that. But we're starting to see some residential properties being listed, and some good properties. I was out showing yesterday, and there's some good properties coming to the market. So, and it's not like all over the map pricing. You're able to
yeah,
go, okay, that makes sense. This is, based on what's happened in the market. So,
yeah. Well, let's quickly talk about what the market's kind of dictating for sellers right now. I think pricing and marketing still matter.
yeah,
Sellers aren't dictating the market. They are in a sense that maybe they're overpricing and things are sitting a little bit longer. That seems to just kind of be across the board.
right,
And to be honest, I think if you are a seller, I don't think that it I think understanding what your property is worth is the most important thing. If you want to push it out up a little bit, I don't think that that hurts. I think that there is negotiation room in the market that we're seeing. Or the other end of the spectrum, there was a house that just got listed in Cougar Creek yesterday that was a great price, and it's in multiple offers
yeah,
before the day's even over, and it got listed at noon. So you pick what avenue you want to go down,
yeah,
depending on your needs. So again, that just tells us that pricing is extremely important because if you price it to sell, it's gone. It's
yeah,
gone, which is good. And if you want to price it a little high and wait it out and see what happens, that's a move that you can make that I wouldn't necessarily say, "Hey, this is a bad decision." But you don't
correct.
want to get carried away with it because then days on the market creep up and then you know
Well,
how that works.
yeah, because you could get into the opposite if you do that.
Yeah.
You end up selling for less than if you would have, you know, we're not in a down market, so
Yeah.
but things that sit tend to get that question. Oh, well, why is it sat so long?
Mhm.
Especially when you're working in whatever, a 60-day market, and it sits for 150 days, people start to ask questions, and then you
Yeah.
end up selling for less than if you'd have listed properly at the start. So
And I do think that
listening's important.
there's certain properties that are just naturally gonna take that 60-day.
Yeah.
Maybe they're a unique property, maybe they're a little bit more high end and they don't necessarily meet that Cougar Creek family home that's under 1.5, right? Where there's tons of people that are
There's tons of
looking for
people
that,
looking
right?
for that, right?
So
Yeah.
there's depends on the property for sure.
100%. If you're going to overprice though, by a little bit, if you're going to get advice from me and I'm going to say your property's worth 2 million and you want to put, 2 on it, let's just say, you have to be willing to go, okay, if we don't have anything in the first 10 days, we need to reduce. Because if you let that sit out and then reduce, it gets buried in my mind. You have to properties, it doesn't matter what type of property they are, it will always sell if the price is right. Because, what you're trying to do is marry a buyer and a seller, right? And I sometimes say, you know, you almost want each person not quite to be ecstatic. That's a good sale for people, right? If a buyer pays a little bit more than they thought and the seller gets a little bit less than they thought, you've probably got pretty good market value on it. So
Mhm.
I just think that you have to be well priced. And if you're going to overprice, make sure you have the conversation with your realtor saying, hey, I'd like to start here, but I'm willing to
Yeah.
bring this down until it it'll move into the market, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think that makes a ton of sense. And then also just understanding the community that your property is in, the square foot
Yeah,
price, what else is listed in that neighborhood and for what price. I think that makes a big difference, because you want to stay competitive with what the comparables would be if I was a buyer and I'm looking at the three properties. You want
hmm
to stay at least competitive with that,
yeah,
in my perspective. So, as far as investors go, multiple offers, we're still seeing that being very much a thing, and even just for residential buyers as well, just on specific property types. But Spring Creek, for example, it has to be a desirable property. I mean, we saw it with
yeah,
the Blackstone property, we saw it with the Spring Creek Timberstone property. So it's still happening in the market. So if there's good revenue numbers, and maybe that's something to educate the sellers on, is when you're going to list a property, make sure that you have your revenue statistics dialed in, because I don't think it matters what the unit really looks like, to be honest. People are looking for performance. And if your unit is occupied a lot personally, then have estimates of what could be generated. Like, get involved with
yeah,
a good property manager so that you can give proper estimates or show and provide your actual revenue numbers, because that's all people care about. They don't care if you know, they do when the numbers aren't that great. They go, like the unit's not as nice as I thought, right? But realistically, maybe that unit could be performing 90 grand. I mean, we saw it in the Blackstone unit. Like, it was nice. It was nothing special. It faced the highway, but it was doing 90K. So I mean, how do you
yeah.
argue that when you're paying
That
700
went into
grand?
multiples too, right?
Yeah, I think there
And
was like five.
I think when you talk about investors, there's two categories. There's the commercial investor that strictly looks at the numbers. You
Mhm,
know, it's like residential real estate and commercial real estate. If you deal with commercial clients and they come in and look at a property, yes, there's some things that have to align and they got to like it and it's got to be, but in the end, they want to know if the round peg fits into the round hole. Does it generate revenue? What's
mhm,
the cap rate? So there's that
mhm.
type of investor, and there's that type in the short-term market as well. And then there's the investor, and you and I have dealt with them, that come along, and when you first start dealing with them, they are all about what they like and feel, and if I came, this is what I'd want. And those things are important, and we definitely want to listen to you. But our job is to, in the end, if you're looking at this as a revenue generating property, is to try and position you so that you're going to pay a good value and get a great return. And so understanding that when you're going to look at properties, if you're going to be using it, 2 months of the year and you want something that faces the Three Sisters and you want to pay a little bit extra and you're not so concerned, you just want it to carry, that's a different investor than the investor that needs to look at okay, that property did 91K and this one did 70.
Yeah,
And some of that could be who managed it, but a lot of it is just the type of property, where it is, the building it's in, so on and so forth. They're all going to do well when you're in peak season.
yeah,
It's that off shoulder season that you can really, generate a little bit more income if that's your ultimate goal. So,
yeah. Well, and just to add to that too, I know that every investor and buyer is a little bit different just based on their needs and their situation and what they're actually looking for. But I do want to say one thing. And that one thing is that make sure that you have somebody who can educate you on the numbers, educate you on the value of a property, and connect you with a property manager who can give you estimates so that when these properties come up, because sometimes there's properties that they're managed crappy
yeah,
or they're used personally a ton, and there's a ton of value there. And you need to understand that so that you
yeah,
can take advantage of this value, because understanding that is key, because I can almost
100%.
guarantee you that 90% of the properties that are on the market have revenue numbers that could probably be bettered a little bit. Like, in my
Yeah,
opinion, and this is not a knock on property management because every client is different as far as personal usage and all that goes, but there's some elite management options out there, and
correct.
securing one of those to generate some prime revenue and really understand your goals is huge. It's
Yeah,
huge. It's the difference because sometimes that property is well known and it's shown in the numbers, but a lot of times it's not. Like prime example, the Spring Creek property that our clients just purchased. I mean, it was performing well, but it wasn't
yeah,
necessarily performing like 90th percentile. And that unit's a 90th percentile. It's a 100 percentile unit as far as desirability goes. Like there's no reason that thing shouldn't be doing top end numbers. And it's
correct.
just that person knew that. It helps because they're a repeat buyer, but that person understood it. So the second it hit the market, there was an offer on that before we could even get into multiples,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
So it's important to understand that. And again, every buyer is going to be different as far as their comfortability and their education and their experience.
Yeah.
But just having these conversations, because you can have these conversations and you can take it one way where it's like, yep, boom, I'm buying that. I don't, this makes a ton of sense. I trust you, whatever. And then you have some buyers that, it takes a little bit longer for them to process. So
And that's okay. I mean, they just
totally.
end up at maybe that unit, it's a little bit before their time. And that's
Hmm.
why we encourage people, give us a call, chat with us or
Yeah.
somebody else that you trust and sit down with them and go through things. Make sure you have buyer representation in place so that you are prepared. When an offer
Right.
comes, you want to be as prepared as possible to execute what you want to do inside the offer. And so having a professional that understands that's really important. Parker, I
Yeah.
think it's important that just from a seller's perspective, maybe talk about uh, the home vacancy tax, and just so you
Yeah.
have some clarity on that.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of so just as a snapshot right now, from my understanding, is Alberta government was talking, it was Alberta, right? It wasn't a federal thing. It was Alberta, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
So Alberta government was talking about bringing in a vacancy tax, a second home vacancy
no.
tax
This is Parker.
is
This
that
is
what you
the
want to talk about?
town. So
Oh, the town of Canmore.
the town of Canmore had a second home vacancy tax.
Sorry. Vacancy home tax essentially wanted to tax second homes that weren't being occupied for a minimum of 6 consecutive months a year.
Yes,
Um, and there was a lot of kickback on that. Eventually, they decided they wanted to proceed, and then there was conversations about, well, if it's an Alberta resident who owns that second home, then maybe we
yes,
won't penalize them. Anyways, there was a lot of going back and forth with this, and there was a lot of people reaching out with property who were like, "Oh man, like I'm in Canmore. I love the community. I love supporting local, but I'm not there 6 months consecutive a year.
correct.
So like, what should I do? Like, how is this going to affect my taxes?" So on and so forth. So there was these lots of conversations, and I think for the majority of the market, they were they were like, yeah, okay, like whatever. If the taxes are higher, then
Yeah,
no problem. But I think a lot of them was just it was more like this is kind of a slap in the face because like I love Canmore, I love supporting local. Like when I'm here, I'm eating out, I'm buying, which if you talk to any local business, they understand that a lot of that I mean, even our business comes from 90% of people who actually don't live here full time.
correct.
I don't want to say 90, but like a good chunk of it,
There's a
50
good
for
chunk.
sure.
Yeah,
So
there's a good chunk.
these people who love the community, there's a reason why they have a property here. Um, I don't think it changes anything on the housing side. I understand that the additional tax money is benefiting the town of Canmore, so I get that, but that's just my opinion. And then I think in terms of the real estate market as a whole, I think it was the uncertainty was playing more of a factor into what we saw kind of the market cool off and become
Yeah,
more balanced because like we just talked about, there's lots of people who want to invest in the market and have a second home here. And they were like, huh, I don't know. Like, there's lots of conversations. Let's just see how it fizzles out. Same with sellers. Like, I'll just hang on to my property and wait. And if it does happen, then maybe I'll sell, maybe I'll
yeah.
hold on. So I think it played a bigger role into what we saw with the activity. And now that there's just a little bit more, I don't want to say certainty because it's not like there's a full decision yet, but it sounds like it's moving in a direction that people are going like, okay, this is going to happen. And then all of a sudden the market's like, boom.
I think it actually is I think it did go to council and got voted on, and I think what the end result was is, 'cause I think it did go to council and got voted on, and I think what the end result was is, 'cause I think it did go to council and got voted on, and I think what the end result was is, 'cause I think it did go to council and got voted on, and I think what the end result was is, 'cause I think it did go to council and got voted on, and I think what the end result was is, 'cause I think it did go to council and got voted on, and I think what the end result was is, 'cause I think it did go to council and got voted on, and I think what the end result was is, 'cause I think it did go to council and got voted on, and I think what the end result was is, 'cause I think it did go to council and got voted on, and I think what the end result was is, 'cause I think it did go to council and got voted on, and I think what the end result was is, 'cause I think it did go to council and got voted on, and I think what the end result was is, 'cause I think it did go to council and got voted on, and I think what the end result was is, 'cause I think it The vacancy tax only comes into play if you're outside a non-resident of Alberta.
Okay.
So anybody that's living in Canmore or from Alberta can, and anybody can purchase a home. And the tax is, it's not like triple substantial. It's not like that, but it is an amount. So if you are, from Canada and you are thinking about buying, make sure you chat with us. We don't want to scare people by any means. I think to Parker's point, there was just uncertainty. Like, what the heck is this going to look like? And not even just from a perspective of um, whether you live in town or whether you live in Alberta or whether you live in anywhere in Canada. There's a lot of people. We know one in specific who um, has a property here, but also, they spend a little bit of time at their other property, and so that consecutive days thing was tough. Even though
Hmm.
this was their primary
Hmm.
residence, this is where they call home, this is where they raise their kids, this is everything else. I just think you got to be careful limiting somebody's somebody works their whole life to have a little bit of freedom and they go away for 2 or 3 months a year, and that all of a sudden affects
Yeah.
their primary residence. So there is some clarity on the vacancy tax as far as Alberta residents being able to purchase in Canmore. If you want any information about that, you can check out the Town of Canmore website or give either Parker or I a shout out or to chat with
Yeah.
your realtor, and they can direct you where to go to find some information. So
Yeah, and I know that their plan is that it's gonna approximately bring 10 to 12 million for housing initiatives in Canmore, so I understand the
if
need
that's
for
where it
that.
goes,
Well, that's a whole nother conversation, but I
yeah,
understand, I can understand why they're wanting to put that in place, like, I do get it. I'm personally not a fan of penalizing people who have succeeded, and have, taken their chances, and, I understand that there's a big theory out there that where the rich get richer, and I get that, but I think there's a way that it can be done where, maybe the homes that are sitting empty 90% of the time, like we can, and I know it's so hard to get a metric on all of these. That's kind of why they've picked the 6 month thing. But I just think that it's a little bit of a miscalculation for a lot of people in this community,
yeah,
who are kind of getting hit with that. And most of them are swallowing their prides and, just paying it and staying involved in the community. But at some point, there are going to be people that say, man, like the juice isn't worth the squeeze anymore. I love Canmore
yeah,
so much, but I'm out. Like
yeah.
I'm not doing
Understand?
this. So
Yeah,
anyways, we don't need to bore people with that
no,
anymore. Yeah, I think the market is picking up. I'm excited to see February again is kind of one of those months where we usually see a little uptick in activity, which we are seeing. There's lots
yeah,
of properties that are coming on the market every week, and the demand is kind of meeting that. So it's exactly what I expect for February. Um, just statistically, maybe not as exact as what we expected initially with kind of how the end of 2025 laid out, but it's back right on track, and I think March and April and so on and so forth, I think it's gonna be a zoo. I do. I think it's gonna
yeah.
be even
I think
busier. I
it's
think
going to
the
be
days on the
busier.
market might drop down as the demand picks up. The interest rates and stuff is we're seeing some
Definitely
security
in
there.
the investment stuff.
Yeah. So
Yeah, 100%.
anyways, I
So
think that's kind of all we needed to want to educate people on today. So if you guys have any questions, please give us a call. If you can like and subscribe to the channel, it does help us grow, and get more people some education that maybe they thought that they didn't know that they needed. So that's the whole intention of this, is just to provide some value to people who own property or looking for property or just curious about Canmore or just want to look at our mugs for 20 minutes. So thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to coming at you next month with another update.